Today is September the 21st. It is a Monday, and I'm bringing to you today's devotional titled, Be Sure Your Sin Will Find You Out. The scripture reading, 2 Samuel chapter 13. Now, the prophet Nathan had admonished David for his adultery and warned him that his hands were stained with the blood of Uriah, saying, Now therefore the sword shall never depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me. Behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine house. Now, David repented of his sin, but only after he was publicly exposed. And the law demanded an adulterer's death, the grace of God spared the king's life. And yet, nevertheless, the consequences of David's sins followed him to his grave. Now Nathan had foretold in chapter 12 and verse 14, By this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme. Well, the immediate consequence of David's sin was the death of the child born by Bathsheba. However, that was the beginning of the sorrows David would face within his own household. 2 Samuel 13 begins with a familiar phrase, and it came to pass. What God declares will inevitably come to pass, and the king would not be able to escape the guilt that his own sins had become a pattern his sons would follow. Tragic is an apt description of events that are recorded in 2 Samuel 13. And we find here incest, murder, irreconcilable sorrows, for not only was Amnon killed, but Absalom fled Israel, leaving David to mourn not only the death of his eldest son, but also the loss of Absalom. Now, I have closing thoughts for you. Many spiritual lessons are found in today's scripture reading. Amnon's friendship with a crafty man provoked him to inconceivable wickedness. He had failed to put away wicked lust, for incest is a grievous sin forbidden by the law. And when he was questioned by his cousin Jonadab, a man described as a very subtle or very crafty man, Amnon verbalized the wickedness in his heart, thus breached a moral barrier to sin. You see, it is one thing to regard sin in your thoughts, but another to speak of it. Rather than reprove Amnon, Jonadab enticed him with a wicked plot that would inevitably defile the virgin Tamar. When she protested, Amnon raped her and then hated her exceedingly, we read in verse 15, so that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said unto her, Arise, be gone. While Amnon's infatuation with his sister was not love, but wicked lust, and her rape was an act of physical violence. There was no remorse in Amnon's heart, and after stealing his sister's purity, he humiliated her and had his servants cast her out of his house. Now, we must not overlook a sad pattern of failure that emerges in David's life. The king had failed to confront the sins of his household, and I suggest his weakness was a result of his own moral failures. You see, he had sacrificed his moral authority and was made weaker in his administration of justice. When he learned that Amnon, his eldest son, had raped his sister, he was furious, but he did nothing. His failure to act as a loving, caring father and a righteous judge, for so was his role as king, provoked his son Absalom to avenge his sister's honor. And 2 years passed, and Absalom plotted to slay his brother. And oh, what weeping and sorrow came over David when he learned Amnon was dead. David's failure cost him 2 sons. Amnon was dead, Absalom was departed. And I close with this quote, Numbers 32:23, Be sure your sin will find you out.